The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Senator Richard Hawthorne's Capitol Hill office, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where Sarah Chen sat reviewing his schedule. At 28, she possessed an efficiency that had made her indispensable over the past 3 years. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and her navy blazer gave her the appearance of someone who belonged in the corridors of power. "Good morning, Senator," Sarah said as Richard entered, his silver hair slightly disheveled from the October wind outside. At 52, he carried himself with the confidence of someone born into privilege, yet there was a weariness in his blue eyes that spoke of long nights and difficult decisions. "Morning, Sarah. What's the damage today?" He poured himself black coffee from the machine she'd already prepared, a ritual that had become as natural as breathing. 3 committee meetings, lunch with the Virginia delegation, and the Defense Appropriations hearing at 2:30. "Oh, and your wife called. She reminded you about dinner with the Harrisons tonight." Sarah's voice carried the slight accent of her San Francisco upbringing, though she'd worked hard to neutralize it over the years. Richard nodded, settling into his leather chair. "What would I do without you, Sarah? You keep this place running better than I do." If only he knew how true that statement was, Sarah thought. For 3 years she'd been the perfect secretary, anticipating his needs, managing his calendar, fielding calls from constituents and lobbyists alike. She'd earned his trust completely, which made what she was really doing here all the more complicated. "Just doing my job, Senator." She handed him a stack of briefing papers. "The morning intelligence summary is on top. There's something interesting about the Meridian defense contract you might want to review before the hearing." Richard's expression darkened as he scanned the document. Meridian defense had been a contentious issue for months, a multi-billion-dollar defense contract that several senators, including some of his closest allies, had been pushing hard to approve, despite questionable terms. "This doesn't look good," he muttered. "The cost overruns are astronomical, and the delivery timeline keeps getting pushed back. How did this even make it this far?" Sarah watched his reaction carefully. This was why she'd been assigned to him 3 years ago. Senator Richard Hawthorne was one of the few politicians in Washington who still seemed to have a conscience. The FBI needed someone on the inside to determine whether he was part of the corruption network surrounding the defense contract, or if he could be an ally in bringing it down. "Senator Marcus Webb called earlier," Sarah said, mentioning Richard's longtime friend and political ally. "He wants to discuss the Meridian vote before the hearing." "I bet he does." Richard's jaw tightened. "Set up a meeting for 11:30. I want to hear what Marcus has to say about these numbers." As Sarah made a note in her planner, her phone buzzed with a text message. The number was encrypted, but she recognized the pattern. Her FBI handler needed to meet. The message was simple: "Package delivery at usual location, 1 p.m. "Is everything all right?" Richard asked, noticing her momentary distraction. "Just a dentist appointment reminder," Sarah lied smoothly. "I'll need to step out for lunch today, if that's okay." "Of course, take whatever time you need." The morning proceeded with its usual rhythm of meetings and phone calls. Sarah watched Richard interact with various officials and lobbyists, noting how he asked probing questions about the Meridian contract that made several visitors uncomfortable. Either he was an exceptional actor, or he genuinely didn't know about the kickbacks and illegal payments that had greased the wheels for the contract's approval. At 11:30, Senator Marcus Webb arrived for his meeting. Sarah had always found something unsettling about Webb. His smile never quite reached his eyes, and he had a way of looking at her that made her skin crawl. Today was no different. "Sarah, sweetheart, you're looking lovely as always," Webb said, his southern drawl thick with false charm. "Thank you, Senator Webb. The senator is waiting for you." Sarah kept her response professional and brief. As the 2 men disappeared into Richard's private office, Sarah activated the small recording device she'd hidden in her pen. Whatever they discussed about Meridian defense would be valuable intelligence for her handler. Through the thick door, she could hear raised voices but couldn't make out specific words. 20 minutes later, Webb emerged, looking flustered and angry. "Sarah, tell Richard he's making a mistake," Webb said, his friendly facade completely gone. Some things are bigger than his Boy Scout conscience. After Webb left, Richard remained in his office for several minutes. When he finally emerged, his face was pale and troubled. "Sarah, I need you to pull all the files we have on the Meridian defense contract. Everything, correspondence, financial projections, the original bidding documents. I want them on my desk by the time I get back from the hearing." "Of course, Senator." "Is everything all right?" Richard paused at the door, his hand on the frame. For a moment, Sarah thought he might confide in her about whatever Webb had said. Instead, he simply shook his head. "Just do this for me, Sarah, and be careful who you mention it to. I'm starting to think we can't trust everyone we thought we could." The FBI safe house was located in a nondescript apartment building in Arlington, Virginia. Sarah had been there dozens of times over the past 3 years, but today felt different. The weight of what she'd learned about the Meridian defense contract, combined with Richard's obvious distress after his meeting with Webb, made her realize how deep this conspiracy might go. Agent David Martinez was waiting for her in the sparse living room, his laptop open on the coffee table. At 45, Martinez had been working financial crimes for the Bureau for over 2 decades, and his weathered face showed the strain of chasing corruption through the halls of power. "You look troubled, Chen," Martinez said without preamble. "What's got you spooked?" Sarah sat across from him, pulling out the digital recorder she'd used during Webb's visit. "I think we may have underestimated what we're dealing with, and I think Senator Hawthorne might be in real danger." She played back the recording, though the audio was muffled and difficult to make out clearly. Martinez frowned as he listened, occasionally rewinding sections. "I can only catch fragments," he said. "Something about too far in to back out now, and consequences for everyone involved. Not exactly smoking gun material." "It's not just what Webb said," Sarah explained. "It's how Richard reacted afterward. He's genuinely disturbed by what he's learning about Meridian defense. I don't think he's part of this, David. I think he's a threat to them." Martinez leaned back in his chair, considering. 3 years of surveillance, and you think Hawthorne is clean? "I think he's exactly what he appears to be. A politician who actually believes in doing the right thing, and that makes him dangerous to whoever is behind this contract fraud." "What's your assessment of the threat level?" Sarah had been dreading this question. Over the past 3 years, she'd developed a genuine respect for Richard Hawthorne, even a fondness for him. He treated her with dignity, valued her opinions, and showed a moral consistency that was rare in Washington. The thought of him being hurt because of her investigation made her stomach turn. "Hi," she said quietly. Webb was angry when he left, and his parting comment about Richard making a mistake felt like a threat. If they think Richard is going to expose the Meridian fraud, they might take action to stop him. Martinez closed his laptop and studied Sarah's face. "You're emotionally compromised, aren't you?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah knew that getting too close to a surveillance target was a cardinal sin in undercover work, but she couldn't deny her feelings. "I respect him," she said carefully. "He's a good man, caught up in something he didn't create. That doesn't change our mission. We need evidence of the corruption network, and Hawthorne is our best access point. Even if he's not directly involved, his office has been handling communications and documentation for months. What if protecting him is more important than the case?" Martinez's expression hardened. "That's not our call to make, Chen. We follow the evidence wherever it leads." Sarah left the safe house feeling more conflicted than ever. As she drove back to Capitol Hill, her phone rang with Richard's number. "Sarah, thank God." His voice was tense with urgency. "I need you to come back to the office immediately. Something's happened." "What's wrong, Senator?" "Just get here as fast as you can. And Sarah, be careful. I think we might be in trouble." Sarah's heart rate spiked as she navigated DC traffic, running red lights when she could get away with it. When she arrived at the Capitol building, she found unusual activity, more security than normal, and several black SUVs parked outside. Richard's office was in chaos. Files were scattered across the floor, desk drawers had been pulled out, and his computer screen was cracked. Richard stood in the middle of it all, his shirt untucked and his usually perfect hair disheveled. "What happened here?" Sarah gasped. "Someone broke in during the hearing," Richard said grimly. "Security says it happened during a shift change. Very professional, very quick. They knew exactly what they were looking for." Sarah surveyed the damage, her trained eye noting the specific areas that had been searched. "What's missing?" "All the Meridian defense files. Every single document related to that contract is gone." Richard turned to face her, and she saw something new in his eyes. Fear mixed with determination. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Her breath caught. Had he figured out who she really was? "Of course, Senator. Do you think I can trust Marcus Webb?" The question surprised her. She'd expected him to confront her about her real identity, not ask about his longtime ally. Why do you ask? Because he was the only person besides you and me who knew I was pulling those files, and now they're gone. Richard moved closer to her, lowering his voice. Sarah, I think someone very close to me is involved in something terrible, and I think they're willing to kill to keep it quiet. The word kill sent a chill down Sarah's spine. If Richard was right, then her cover might be the least of their problems. The emergency meeting with Martinez couldn't wait until their scheduled contact. Sarah used a secure phone to call from the Capitol building's parking garage, her breath visible in the cold October evening air. They're moving faster than we anticipated, she told Martinez without preamble. Richard's office was ransacked today, and all the Meridian files are gone. Convenient timing, Martinez replied, his voice crackling through the encrypted connection, right after his meeting with Webb. David, I think Richard suspects Webb is involved. He's asking questions about trust and loyalty. If he starts digging deeper on his own, he could expose our operation or get himself killed. There was a long pause on the other end. What are you suggesting, Chen? Sarah closed her eyes, knowing she was about to cross a line that would change everything. I think we need to bring him in, tell him the truth about who I am and what we're investigating. Absolutely not. That would compromise 3 years of deep cover work. Those 3 years won't matter if he's dead, Sarah's voice echoed in the concrete garage. Look, Richard isn't part of the corruption. He's actually trying to stop it. If we work with him instead of around him, we might actually be able to build a solid case. The Bureau doesn't work that way, and you know it. The Bureau also doesn't usually have senators getting killed on their watch, Sarah shot back. I'm telling you, David, something big is about to happen. I can feel it. After Martinez hung up, clearly frustrated with her assessment, Sarah sat in her car for several minutes, weighing her options. Her FBI training told her to follow orders and maintain her cover. But every instinct she'd developed over 3 years of watching Richard Hawthorne told her that he was in immediate danger. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Can you come to my house tonight? I need to show you something. Come alone. Sarah stared at the message, her pulse quickening. This was either a breakthrough or a trap. Either Richard had discovered something crucial about the conspiracy, or someone had gotten to him and was using him to get to her. The Hawthorne estate in McLean, Virginia, was a testament to old money and political influence. As Sarah drove through the gates, she noticed the usual security detail was absent. The house was dark except for a single light in Richard's study. Richard answered the door himself, which was unusual. His wife was supposed to be at a charity event, but the complete absence of household staff was concerning. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice strained. We need to talk. He led her to his study, where the walls were lined with law books and political memorabilia from his 15 years in the Senate. On his desk was a laptop computer and several printed documents. Richard, where is everyone? Your security detail? The staff? I sent them away for the evening. What I'm about to show you, I couldn't risk anyone else seeing it. He gestured for her to sit across from his desk. Sarah, in 3 years of working together, have I ever given you reason to doubt my integrity? The question caught her off guard. No, Senator, never. And have I ever asked you to do anything that seemed illegal or unethical? Of course not. Richard nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Then I'm going to trust you with something that could get us both killed. He turned the laptop screen toward her. What she saw made her blood run cold. It was a detailed financial spreadsheet showing payments from Meridian Defense to various offshore accounts, with corresponding dates that matched votes and committee decisions over the past 2 years. Where did you get this? Sarah whispered. I've been conducting my own investigation since the break-in, Richard said. I had copies of some documents stored at home, and I reached out to a few contacts at the Pentagon who were willing to share information off the record. Sarah scanned the spreadsheet, her FBI training allowing her to quickly identify the pattern of corruption. The amounts were staggering, millions of dollars in kickbacks and bribes, and one name appeared more frequently than any other as a recipient, Senator Marcus Webb. My God, she breathed. Marcus has been taking money from Meridian Defense for 2 years. It gets worse. Richard pulled up another document. These are communication records between Webb and Meridian executives. They've been coordinating votes, influencing committee assignments, and pressuring other senators to support the contract. Sarah's mind raced. This was the smoking gun evidence the FBI had been seeking for 3 years. But it also meant Richard was in mortal danger. "Richard, you can't investigate this alone. These people have already shown they're willing to break into a senator's office. They won't hesitate to escalate further." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I need your help, Sarah. I trust you more than anyone else in Washington, and I need someone I can rely on to help me figure out how to expose this without getting killed in the process." Sarah felt the weight of her deception crushing down on her. Here was a man who genuinely trusted her, asking for her help to do the right thing, and she was lying to him about everything: her background, her purpose, even her real name. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, but was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Richard's face went pale. "I wasn't expecting anyone." Sarah moved to the window and peered through the curtains. 3 black SUVs were parked in the circular driveway, and several men in dark suits were approaching the house. They moved with military precision, and she could see the outline of weapons under their jackets. "Richard, we need to leave. Now." "Who are they?" "I don't know, but they're not here to talk." Sarah's training kicked in as she assessed their options. "Is there another way out of this room?" "The French doors lead to the garden, but that's our exit." "Grab the laptop and any other evidence you have. Leave everything else." As they gathered the crucial documents, Sarah heard the front door being kicked in. Heavy footsteps echoed through the house, along with muffled voices coordinating a search. "This way," Richard whispered, leading her toward the French doors. They slipped out into the cold night air, the October wind cutting through Sarah's blazer. The estate's garden provided some cover, but they needed to reach Sarah's car, which was parked near the front of the house. "Stay low and follow me," Sarah instructed, her FBI training taking over completely. As they crept through the shadows, Sarah could hear the intruders moving through the house, searching room by room. They had maybe 5 minutes before the search reached the study, and the men realized their targets had escaped. "Sarah," Richard whispered as they reached the edge of the garden, "who are you really?" The question she'd been dreading had finally come, at the worst possible moment. "My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm an FBI agent," Sarah whispered, as they crouched behind a marble fountain in Richard's garden. "I've been undercover in your office for 3 years, investigating corruption related to the Meridian defense contract." Richard's face went through a series of emotions: shock, betrayal, anger, and finally understanding. "You've been spying on me." "Initially, yes. But Richard, you have to understand. You weren't part of the corruption. You were never the target." "Then why?" "Because your office handles all the documentation and communications for the Defense Committee. We needed access to see who was involved in the fraud." Sarah peered around the fountain toward her car. The men from the SUVs were now visible in the house, their flashlights moving from room to room. "We can discuss this later. Right now we need to survive." Richard was quiet for a moment, processing the revelation. "Those men in my house, they're not FBI, are they?" "No. If I had to guess, they're private security working for whoever is behind the Meridian fraud. And they're here to make sure the evidence you found never sees daylight. Along with us." Sarah nodded grimly. "Along with us." They made their way carefully toward Sarah's car, using the landscaping for cover. Sarah's sedan was parked about 50 yards from the house, and they'd have to cross an open area of the driveway to reach it. "When I say go, we run straight for the car," Sarah whispered. "Don't look back, don't stop for anything." Richard nodded, clutching the laptop bag containing the evidence that could bring down a multi-billion-dollar conspiracy. "Go." They sprinted across the open ground, their footsteps loud against the brick driveway. Sarah reached the car first and had the engine started by the time Richard got in. As they pulled away from the house, she could see figures emerging from the front door. "They're following us," Richard said, looking back at the pursuing headlights. Sarah's FBI training included high-speed driving, but the winding roads of McLean weren't ideal for evasion. She needed to get to a public area where their pursuers wouldn't risk exposure. "Call 911, she instructed Richard, "and tell them what? That a senator is being chased by unknown assailants who broke into his house. Tell them there's been a break-in at your residence, and you're in pursuit of the suspects. Give them our license plate number and location." Richard made the call while Sarah navigated through the residential streets, trying to put distance between them and the SUVs. The 911 dispatcher instructed them to stop and wait for police, but Sarah knew that wouldn't keep them safe. "We need to meet with my FBI handler," Sarah said. "He needs to see this evidence, and we need protection." "Can we trust him?" The question gave Sarah pause. After Martinez's reluctance to consider Richard's safety over the investigation, she wasn't entirely sure. But they needed help from someone, and the FBI was their best option. "I think so," she said, though her voice carried uncertainty. They drove in tense silence for several minutes, checking mirrors constantly for signs of pursuit. Finally, Sarah pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner in Arlington, choosing a spot under bright lights where they'd be visible to other people. "Why here?" Richard asked. "Public place, good visibility, multiple exit routes." Sarah pulled out her secure phone. "I'm calling Martinez." The phone rang several times before Martinez answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Chen, it's past midnight. This better be important. Someone just tried to kill Senator Hawthorne and me. We have evidence that could blow this case wide open, but we need immediate protection." There was a pause. "Where are you?" Sarah gave him the location of the diner. "David, we need extraction now. These people aren't playing games anymore. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Stay in public view and don't trust anyone else." After hanging up, Sarah turned to Richard. "I know you have questions about my deception, and you have every right to be angry with me." Richard stared out the window at the nearly empty parking lot. 3 years, Sarah. 3 years I trusted you with everything, my schedule, my family, my political career, and you were investigating me the entire time. I was investigating the people around you, and what I found was a man with genuine integrity in a system full of corruption. That's not what I expected to find. Is Sarah Chen even your real name? Yes, my background, my education, my personality, all of that is real. The only thing that was fake was my reason for being there." Richard turned to look at her directly. "And what you feel for me? The respect? The friendship? Was that fake too?" The question hit Sarah harder than she'd expected. Over 3 years, she had developed genuine feelings of respect and even affection for Richard Hawthorne. He'd been kind to her, had valued her opinions, and had shown her a version of politics that still believed in public service. "No," she said quietly. "That was real. All of it." Before Richard could respond, headlights swept across the diner's parking lot. A single black sedan pulled up near their car, and Sarah recognized Martinez getting out of the driver's seat. "That's my handler," Sarah said. They met Martinez at the diner's entrance. Even at midnight, the FBI agent looked alert and professional, though Sarah could see the tension in his posture. "Senator Hawthorne," Martinez said, extending his hand. "Agent Martinez, FBI, I understand you've had an eventful evening." "That's one way to put it," Richard replied dryly. They took a booth in the back corner of the diner, away from the few other late-night customers. Richard placed the laptop on the table between them. "This contains financial records showing systematic bribery and corruption related to the Meridian defense contract," Richard said. "Senator Webb appears to be at the center of it, but there are other names as well." Martinez opened the laptop and began scrolling through the documents, his expression growing more serious with each screen. "Where did you get these records?" he asked. "Pentagon contacts and financial institutions that were willing to cooperate with an unofficial investigation." "Unofficial?" "I suspected corruption, but didn't know who I could trust in official channels. It appears that suspicion was justified, given that someone tried to kill us tonight." Martinez closed the laptop and looked at both of them. "This evidence is extremely valuable, but it also puts you both in significant danger. The people behind this conspiracy have resources and connections that make them very dangerous adversaries." "What do you recommend?" Sarah asked. "Protective custody for both of you while we build a case around this evidence. It could take weeks or months to identify all the players and gather enough evidence for prosecutions." Richard shook his head. "I can't disappear for months. I have responsibilities, constituents who depend on me." "Senator, with respect, you won't be able to help anyone if you're dead." The harsh reality of their situation settled over the table. Sarah looked at Richard, seeing the weight of impossible choices in his expression. He'd stumbled onto a conspiracy that threatened not just his life, but potentially the integrity of the entire defense appropriations process. "There might be another way," Sarah said slowly. "What if we don't hide? What if we use Richard's position to expose the conspiracy publicly?" Martinez's eyes narrowed. "That would be extremely dangerous. More dangerous than spending months in hiding while these people destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses," Sarah countered. "Richard has credibility and media access. If we can get this information to the right journalists with proper protection, we might be able to bring down the entire network." Richard leaned forward. "I like it. Use my Senate position as a platform for exposure rather than hiding from the truth. Martinez looked between them, clearly uncomfortable with the suggestion. That's not how the Bureau typically handles these situations. Nothing about this situation is typical, Sarah replied. And right now offense might be our best defense. The decision to go public rather than into hiding was made at 3:47 a.m. in a dingy Arlington diner, over cold coffee and the weight of evidence that could topple careers and send people to prison for decades. Martinez had finally agreed to the plan, though his reluctance was obvious in every line of his weathered face. If we're doing this, we do it right, Martinez said, closing the laptop that contained the Meridian defense evidence. Full FBI protection, coordinated media strategy, and backup plans for when things go sideways, because they will go sideways. Richard nodded, his senatorial composure intact despite the circumstances. I have contacts at the Washington Post and CNN who can handle this kind of story. Investigative journalists who won't be intimidated by threats or pressure. We'll need more than media coverage, Sarah interjected. The people behind this conspiracy have had 2 years to cover their tracks. They'll have lawyers, public relations firms, and political allies ready to discredit everything we present. Which is why we need to be overwhelming and undeniable, Richard replied. Not just financial records, but testimony, communications, a complete picture that can't be dismissed as political theater. Martinez pulled out his phone. I'm calling the Washington field office. We'll need a full tactical team and coordination with the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is going to be the biggest political corruption case in a decade. As Martinez stepped away to make his calls, Sarah and Richard sat in uncomfortable silence. The revelation of her true identity had changed the dynamic between them, and the weight of 3 years of deception hung in the air like smoke. I keep thinking about all the conversations we had, Richard said quietly. All the times I confided in you about political strategy, personal concerns, family issues. You were analyzing everything I said, weren't you? Sarah felt a familiar pang of guilt. Initially, yes, but Richard, somewhere along the way, it stopped being analysis and started being genuine concern. You became someone I cared about protecting, not just investigating. How am I supposed to know what was real and what was performance? The question was fair, and Sarah didn't have a good answer. I don't know. I can only tell you that my respect for you, my belief in your integrity, that was never performance. Before Richard could respond, Martinez returned to the table, his expression grim. We have a problem, he said. Senator Webb has called an emergency press conference for 8 a.m. this morning. According to my contacts, he's planning to announce that you've been acting erratically and may be suffering from some kind of breakdown. Richard's face flushed with anger. He's trying to discredit me before I can expose him. It's a smart play, Sarah admitted grudgingly. If he can make you look unstable or unreliable, it undermines anything you might say about the corruption. Then we move faster, Richard said, his voice taking on the steel that had made him successful in politics. We call our own press conference for 7 a.m., beat him to the punch. Martinez shook his head. That's not enough time to prepare properly. We need to verify the evidence, coordinate with prosecutors, ensure witness protection. David, Sarah interrupted, if Webb gets ahead of this story, it's over. We'll spend months trying to overcome the narrative he establishes in the next few hours. The FBI agent looked between them, clearly torn between proper procedure and tactical necessity. Finally, he sighed and pulled out his phone again. I'll call the field office and the U.S. Attorney. We'll have federal marshals at the Capitol by 6 a.m. for security. But, Senator, you understand that once you go public with these accusations, there's no taking them back. Your life will never be the same. Richard's smile was grim, but determined. Agent Martinez, my life changed the moment I decided to investigate Meridian Defense. At least this way, I have some control over how it changes. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Martinez coordinated security arrangements, while Sarah helped Richard craft a statement that would be both politically powerful and legally defensible. They worked in a secure FBI facility in downtown D.C., surrounded by agents and prosecutors who were scrambling to prepare for what would become one of the most significant corruption cases in recent memory. At 6:30 a.m., they arrived at the Capitol building to find it already crawling with media trucks and reporters. Word had leaked about the dueling press conferences, and the political world was buzzing with speculation about what Richard Hawthorne was about to reveal. Second thoughts? Sarah asked as they walked toward the press room, flanked by federal marshals. "Every step," Richard admitted, "but not about doing this, only about whether I should have done it sooner." The press room was packed beyond capacity, with cameras from every major news network and reporters from newspapers across the country. Sarah took a position at the side of the room, her FBI credentials giving her access, despite not being on Richard's official staff anymore. Richard approached the podium with the bearing of someone who had spent 15 years addressing the public on matters of national importance. But Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands as he arranged his notes. "Ladies and gentlemen of the press," Richard began, his voice carrying the authority of his office, "I'm here today to reveal evidence of systematic corruption involving defense contracts worth billions of dollars, corruption that reaches into the highest levels of our government." The room erupted with questions and camera flashes, but Richard continued without pause. "Over the past several months, I have discovered financial records showing that the Meridian defense contract was awarded not based on merit or cost-effectiveness, but because of illegal kickbacks and bribes paid to government officials. I have evidence of these payments totaling more than $50 million over 2 years." Sarah watched the faces in the crowd, seeing the mix of skepticism, excitement, and calculation that characterized the Washington press corps. This story would define careers and potentially change the political landscape. "The evidence I'm presenting today has been shared with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Federal investigators are already pursuing criminal charges against those involved in this conspiracy." Richard paused, his eyes finding Sarah's across the crowded room. For a moment, the political theater fell away, and she saw the man she'd come to respect over 3 years, someone willing to risk everything to do what he believed was right. "I know there will be attempts to discredit this evidence and attack my character. That's what happens when you threaten powerful interests. But the American people deserve to know when their tax dollars are being stolen and their national security is being compromised by greed." The questions came like an avalanche, but Richard fielded them with the skill of a seasoned politician. Yes, he had evidence. Yes, he was working with federal investigators. No, he would not name specific individuals until charges were filed, but the evidence spoke for itself. As the press conference concluded, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had fired the first shot in what would undoubtedly be a war. Now they had to see if they could survive the response. Senator Marcus Webb's press conference began exactly 1 hour after Richard's ended, and it was a masterclass in political warfare. Standing before the same crowd of reporters in a different room of the Capitol, Webb projected the calm authority of someone who had weathered many political storms. Sarah watched the live feed from the FBI's temporary command center, surrounded by agents and prosecutors who were already working to corroborate Richard's evidence. The contrast between the two senators was stark. Where Richard had appeared earnest and somewhat strained, Webb looked polished and unflappable. "I'm deeply saddened by what we've witnessed this morning," Webb began, his voice carrying just the right note of concerned disappointment. "Senator Hawthorne is a man I've considered a friend for many years, which makes his apparent breakdown all the more tragic." "Here we go," Martinez muttered, standing beside Sarah as they watched Webb's performance. "Over the past several weeks, I've noticed concerning changes in Senator Hawthorne's behavior, paranoid accusations, erratic decision-making, and unfortunately, what appears to be a complete break from reality regarding the Meridian defense contract." Webb went on to present a carefully crafted narrative that painted Richard as someone struggling with the pressures of political life, possibly suffering from mental health issues that were affecting his judgment. He expressed sympathy for his longtime friend, while systematically undermining every accusation Richard had made. The Meridian defense contract was awarded through a completely transparent process, with oversight from multiple agencies and committees. The suggestion that this contract involved illegal kickbacks is not only false, it's deeply harmful to our national security interests. Sarah found herself grudgingly impressed by Webb's performance. He managed to sound both concerned and authoritative, dismissing Richard's evidence as the product of a disturbed mind, while positioning himself as the reasonable voice trying to protect both his friend and the integrity of the defense appropriations process. "Senator Webb is good at this," observed Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Park, who had been assigned to coordinate the prosecution. "He's not denying the existence of the evidence, just questioning Richard's mental state and interpretation of it." "It's exactly what I would do in his position," Sarah admitted. "Attack the messenger, not the message." The strategy was working. Sarah could see it in the body language of the reporters, in the questions they were asking. Webb had planted seeds of doubt about Richard's credibility that would be difficult to overcome, regardless of how solid the evidence might be. Martinez's phone buzzed with an urgent message. After reading it, his face went pale. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "Webb's people have been busy overnight. They filed a formal complaint with the Senate Ethics Committee questioning Richard's mental fitness to serve. They're also claiming that the evidence he presented was obtained through illegal means." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of illegal means? They're suggesting that Richard may have accessed classified Pentagon systems without authorization. If that allegation sticks, it could invalidate everything we have. The implications were staggering. If Webb could convince the Ethics Committee that Richard had broken federal laws to obtain the evidence, it wouldn't matter how damning that evidence was. It would be inadmissible in court and politically toxic. "Is there any truth to the allegation?" Park asked. Sarah thought about the methods Richard had described for obtaining the financial records. He said he had Pentagon contacts who shared information off the record. If those contacts accessed classified systems to get that information, then we have a problem, Martinez finished. The room fell silent except for the sound of Webb's press conference continuing on the television. He was now taking questions from reporters, handling each one with the smooth confidence of someone who had the upper hand. "Senator Hawthorne's accusations are serious, and they deserve to be investigated properly," Webb was saying. "But they should be investigated by appropriate authorities, not litigated in the press based on potentially illegal evidence gathering." Sarah realized with growing horror that Webb had outmaneuvered them completely. In the space of 1 hour, he had transformed the narrative from corruption allegations into questions about Richard's mental health and legal conduct. Her secure phone rang, displaying Richard's number. "Sarah, are you watching this?" Richard's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Unfortunately, yes. He's destroying me. Everything we worked for, everything we risked. He's making it look like the paranoid delusions of someone having a breakdown." Sarah could hear the frustration and desperation in Richard's voice. "Richard, where are you right now?" "In my office. I've got federal marshals outside, but I needed some space to think." "You need to be careful. Webb's people have filed an ethics committee complaint questioning your fitness to serve. They're also claiming you obtained the evidence illegally." There was a long pause. "Did I?" The question hung in the air. Sarah realized that in their rush to expose the corruption, neither of them had carefully examined the legal implications of how Richard had gathered his evidence. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "We need to review exactly how your Pentagon contacts obtained those records." "It doesn't matter now," Richard said, his voice heavy with defeat. "Even if everything we have is legally obtained and completely accurate, Webb has poisoned the well. Every reporter, every colleague, every prosecutor is going to wonder if I'm mentally stable enough to be trusted." Sarah looked around the room at the FBI agents and prosecutors who were supposed to be building a case around Richard's evidence. Already she could see doubt creeping into their expressions as they watched Webb's masterful performance. "Richard, don't give up. We knew they would fight back." "Fight back? Sarah, this isn't fighting back. This is complete annihilation. By tomorrow I'll be known as the senator who had a public breakdown and made wild accusations against his friends. Everything I've worked for in 15 years of public service, gone." Before Sarah could respond, Martinez was at her side, holding his phone. "We have another problem," he said grimly. "Richard's house was firebombed 20 minutes ago." Sarah felt the world shift around her. "What?" "No one was hurt. The house was empty, but it's being treated as a terrorist attack on a federal official. The media is already speculating about whether this is connected to Richard's accusations or if it's retaliation by foreign agents who don't want the defense contract investigated." The cruel irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The attack on Richard's house would normally be seen as validation of his claims about being in danger. But Webb had so effectively portrayed Richard as mentally unstable that even an assassination attempt could be spun as either a coincidence or the work of foreign actors rather than domestic corruption. "Richard," Sarah said into the phone, "your house was just firebombed. You're not safe in your office. You need to get to the FBI facility immediately." "My house?" Richard's voice was hollow with shock. "No one was hurt. But Richard, this proves we're on the right track. They're escalating because they're desperate. or it proves that my accusations have made me a target for people who want to protect our national security interests from what they see as a reckless senator having a breakdown. Sarah realized that Webb's psychological warfare was working better than he could have hoped. He had so thoroughly undermined Richard's credibility that even Richard was beginning to doubt himself. "Richard, listen to me. I've spent 3 years watching you make decisions, studying your character, analyzing your behavior. You are not having a breakdown. You are not mentally unstable. You are a good man who discovered corruption and chose to do something about it. Don't let Webb take that away from you." There was a long silence and Sarah held her breath, knowing that Richard's response would determine whether they had any chance of salvaging their case. Finally, Richard's voice came through the phone, stronger than before. "You're right, and Sarah, thank you for reminding me who I am." The FBI's secure facility had become a war room by evening, with whiteboards covered in financial flow charts, surveillance photos, and timelines that mapped 2 years of corruption. Sarah stood before the largest board, studying the connections between Meridian Defense, Senator Webb, and a dozen other officials whose names had emerged from Richard's evidence. "We're missing something," she said to the room full of agents and prosecutors. Webb's counterattack was too sophisticated, too well coordinated. He had that entire narrative prepared before Richard even went public. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Park looked up from a stack of financial documents. "You think he knew this was coming?" "I think he's been preparing for exposure for months, maybe longer. Look at the timing of everything. The break-in at Richard's office happened the same day he met with Webb. The men who attacked Richard's house moved like a professional team. This isn't reactive crisis management. This is a planned defense." Martinez joined them at the whiteboard, his face showing the strain of 18 hours without sleep. If that's true, then Webb has had time to destroy evidence, coordinate alibis, and prepare legal defenses. We might be fighting a losing battle. Richard had been silent for most of the evening, reviewing documents and making notes with the methodical precision that had made him effective as a senator. Now he looked up from his work, his eyes focused with renewed determination. "Webb made one mistake," Richard said quietly. "He assumed I would break under pressure, that the mental health narrative would make me retreat. But I've been in politics for 15 years. I know how character assassination works, and I know how to survive it." Sarah felt a surge of hope. "What are you thinking?" "Webb's strength is also his weakness. He's so confident in his political skills that he's forgotten I have political skills too. And more importantly, I have something he doesn't have: the truth." Richard stood and walked to the whiteboard, picking up a marker. "Webb is operating under the assumption that all evidence can be discredited and all witnesses can be intimidated. But there's one piece of evidence he can't touch." He drew a circle around one name on the board: Thomas Hartley, Meridian Defense's chief financial officer. Hartley is the one person who knows every detail of the financial arrangements. He's the man who actually made the payments to Webb and the others. And according to my Pentagon sources, he's been growing increasingly nervous about the FBI investigation. Martinez frowned. "We've tried to approach Hartley multiple times. His lawyers have made it clear he won't cooperate without immunity, and the Justice Department won't offer immunity without knowing what he has to say." "Then we break the stalemate," Richard said. "I approach him directly, senator to corporate executive. Not an FBI investigation, not a federal prosecution, just a conversation between two men who are both in serious trouble." "Richard, that's incredibly dangerous," Sarah protested. "If Webb's people find out you're trying to flip Hartley, they might decide you're too big a threat to leave alive. They've already firebombed my house. How much more of a threat can I be?" Park shook her head. "Senator, any conversation you have with Hartley without his lawyers present could be thrown out of court. And if you're seen as trying to tamper with a potential witness—" "I'm not talking about legal admissibility," Richard interrupted. "I'm talking about finding out what really happened so we know how to fight this. Once we understand the full scope of the conspiracy, we can figure out how to prove it legally." Sarah studied Richard's face, seeing the familiar determination that had made her respect him over 3 years of working together. But she also saw something new, a hardness that hadn't been there before the attacks began. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "Hartley lives alone in a Georgetown townhouse. His wife and children are in Switzerland for the month, supposedly for a skiing vacation, but probably because he knows trouble is coming. He's scared, isolated, and facing the prospect of federal prison, while watching his co-conspirators prepare to throw him under the bus. Richard turned to face the room. "I think if the right person approached him at the right moment, he might be willing to talk." "The right person being you?" Martinez asked. "The right person being someone he trusts. Someone who's been part of his world but isn't obviously working with law enforcement." Sarah felt a chill as she realized what Richard was suggesting. "You want me to approach him as your secretary, don't you? Someone he's met before, someone who seems sympathetic to his situation." "Webb has spent the day convincing everyone that I'm mentally unstable. But no one is questioning your credibility, Sarah. You could approach Hartley as someone who's concerned about my breakdown, someone who might have information that could help him protect himself." The idea was audacious and risky, but Sarah could see the logic. Hartley would be more likely to trust someone who seemed to be betraying Richard than someone who was obviously working with federal investigators. "It could work," Park admitted reluctantly. "If Hartley believes Sarah is willing to provide information about Richard's evidence in exchange for protection or money, he might reveal details about the conspiracy we could never get otherwise." Martinez was less enthusiastic. "And if it goes wrong, we lose our best witness and potentially give Webb's people a chance to eliminate both Sarah and Richard." Sarah looked around the room at the faces of experienced law enforcement professionals who were all struggling with the same impossible equation: how to build a case against suspects who had unlimited resources and political connections. "I'll do it," she said finally, "but not here in D.C. Too much surveillance, too many ways for Webb's people to find out what we're planning." "Where then?" Richard asked. Sarah smiled grimly. "Hartley has a weekend house in the Shenandoah Valley. My FBI background check on him shows he goes there when he's stressed. If we're right about his state of mind, he'll probably head there to think about his options." The plan came together quickly. Sarah would drive to the valley as if taking a weekend break from the chaos in Washington. She would encounter Hartley accidentally at a local restaurant or coffee shop, express concern about Richard's mental state, and carefully probe to see if Hartley would reveal information about the conspiracy. "This is a fishing expedition," Martinez warned. "If Hartley doesn't bite, we've gained nothing and potentially alerted Webb that we're trying to flip witnesses." "And if he does bite," Sarah replied, "we might get the breakthrough we need to bring down this entire network." Richard walked her to the door as she prepared to leave for Virginia. The federal marshals would maintain a discreet distance to ensure her safety while avoiding the appearance of official law enforcement involvement. "Sarah, I know I don't have the right to ask you to do this," Richard said quietly. "Not after lying to you for 3 years about who I really was." She turned to face him, seeing the guilt and concern in his expression. "Richard, we've both been lying about who we really are. The difference is I chose my deception. You had deception forced on you by circumstances." "What do you mean?" "I mean the man I've watched for 3 years, the principled, dedicated public servant. That's who you really are. The paranoid, unstable politician Webb is trying to paint you as. That's the lie. Don't lose sight of which version is true." As Sarah drove toward the Shenandoah Valley in the gathering darkness, she reflected on how completely her life had changed in just 48 hours. 3 days ago, she was a secretary with a secret. Now she was an FBI agent trying to save both her mission and a man she had come to care about more than was professionally wise. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hartley is at the Riverside Inn. Order the salmon. He'll approach you." Sarah stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Someone was helping them, someone with inside knowledge of Hartley's movements and access to his communications. The question was whether that someone was an ally or whether she was driving into a trap. The Riverside Inn sat on the banks of the Shenandoah River, like something from a postcard, its stone walls and warm lights promising the kind of peaceful escape that Washington power brokers craved but rarely found. Sarah arrived at 8 o'clock on a crisp October evening, the autumn leaves reflecting gold and red in the river's dark water. She had changed into civilian clothes, jeans, a sweater, and a leather jacket that made her look like any other young professional seeking refuge from city stress. The wire she wore was FBI standard, nearly undetectable but capable of recording every word of whatever conversation might unfold. The restaurant was busy enough to provide cover, but not so crowded that private conversation would be impossible. Sarah requested a table by the window and ordered the salmon, as instructed by the mysterious text message. Now she had to wait and see if Thomas Hartley would appear, and whether he would be alone. She didn't have to wait long. Hartley arrived 15 minutes later, and Sarah recognized him immediately from the surveillance photos in the FBI files. At 58, he was a distinguished man with silver hair and expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide the stress lines around his eyes. He scanned the restaurant carefully before approaching the hostess. Sarah forced herself to appear relaxed, reading a novel while occasionally glancing at her phone like someone expecting a message. When Hartley was seated at a table across the room, she allowed herself one casual look in his direction, then returned to her book. The approach came during dessert. Hartley had been nursing a single glass of wine for over an hour, occasionally glancing in her direction with the careful assessment of someone trying to make a decision. Finally, he stood and walked to her table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the refined accent of someone educated at exclusive schools. "Aren't you Senator Hawthorne's secretary, Sarah Chen?" Sarah looked up with carefully manufactured surprise. "Mr. Hartley? What a coincidence. Are you here for the weekend? May I sit? I was hoping to have a word with you, actually." Sarah gestured to the empty chair across from her, her heart rate accelerating. "Of course. Though I have to say, this is unexpected." Hartley settled into the chair and signaled the waiter for another wine. "I imagine you've had an interesting few days, given everything that's happened with Senator Hawthorne." "That's one way to put it." Sarah allowed exhaustion to creep into her voice. "It's been difficult to watch someone you respect go through what appears to be a breakdown." "You think he's having a breakdown?" The question was carefully neutral, but Sarah could hear the hope underneath it. Hartley wanted her to confirm Webb's narrative about Richard's mental state. "I don't know what else to call it," Sarah said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Richard has always been intense about his work, but the past few weeks have been different. The paranoia, the wild accusations. I'm genuinely worried about him." Hartley's wine arrived, and he took a careful sip before responding. "The accusations he made yesterday, about corruption and kickbacks, those were quite specific. Did he share details with you about where that information came from?" Sarah recognized the fishing expedition but played along. "He said he had sources at the Pentagon who were helping him investigate defense contracts. But honestly, Mr. Hartley, some of the things he claimed, I don't see how they could be true." "What kind of things?" "Financial records showing payments to government officials, communication logs, bank transfers. He showed me spreadsheets with names and amounts that seemed too detailed to be fabricated, but too outrageous to be real." Hartley leaned back in his chair and Sarah could see him processing this information. "Did he mention any specific names? Officials who were allegedly receiving payments?" This was the moment of truth. Sarah had to give Hartley enough information to make him believe she was betraying Richard's confidence, while being careful not to reveal anything that could actually damage their investigation. "Senator Webb was mentioned prominently," she said quietly, "but also some people I didn't recognize. Pentagon officials, other senators, even some corporate executives." "Corporate executives from which companies?" "Meridian Defense was the main one, but there were others." Richard seemed to think there was an entire network of people involved in steering defense contracts to specific companies in exchange for financial benefits. Hartley finished his wine in one gulp and signaled for another. Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across his face, the desire to know how much Richard actually knew, warring with the fear of revealing too much. "Sarah, can I ask you something in confidence?" "Of course. Do you think Senator Hawthorne is dangerous? I mean, if he's having some kind of mental episode, could he pose a threat to the people he's making accusations against?" The question revealed more than Hartley probably intended. He wasn't just worried about Richard's credibility, he was worried about Richard's intentions. "I think he's desperate," Sarah said carefully, "and desperate people sometimes do unpredictable things." "Why do you ask?" Hartley looked out the window at the dark river, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "Because if the things he's saying were true, hypothetically speaking, the people involved would have a lot to lose. Careers, reputations, freedom. They might feel they had no choice but to protect themselves. Protect themselves how? However they thought necessary. The implication hung in the air between them like smoke. Hartley was telling her as clearly as he dared that Richard was in mortal danger from the people he was accusing. "Mr. Hartley," Sarah said, lowering her voice, "are you trying to warn me about something?" Hartley turned back to face her, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes. "I'm trying to understand how much trouble we're all in, because if Senator Hawthorne actually has the evidence he claims to have, then a lot of very powerful people are going to want that evidence to disappear. along with anyone who's seen it, including his secretary, including anyone who could testify about what they've seen or heard. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October evening. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about self-preservation. When people are facing life in prison, they calculate risks differently. Hartley leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Sarah, if I were you, I would be very careful about what I do with any information the senator has shared with me, and I would think very seriously about whether staying loyal to someone who might be mentally unstable is worth risking my own life. Are you offering me something, Mr. Hartley? I'm offering you advice, but if you were interested in ensuring your own safety, there are people who would be very grateful for accurate information about what Senator Hawthorne actually knows. There it was, the offer Sarah had been hoping for. Hartley was trying to recruit her as an informant against Richard. What kind of people? The kind who have resources to protect their friends and eliminate their enemies. The kind who understand that sometimes justice is less important than stability. Sarah nodded slowly, as if considering the offer. And what would they want to know? Everything. What evidence the senator has, where he got it, who else has seen it, what his plans are for using it. In exchange, you would be protected and compensated for your cooperation. How much compensation? Hartley smiled for the first time that evening. Enough to ensure you never have to work again, plus protection for you and your family for as long as necessary. Sarah pretended to consider the offer while her mind raced. Hartley had just confirmed that there was indeed a conspiracy, that it involved people with significant resources, and that they were willing to kill to protect themselves, but she needed more details to make the information useful. I would need to know who I was working with, she said finally, and I would need guarantees about my safety. Those details can be arranged. But first, I need to know. Are you interested in principle? Sarah looked out at the river, as if weighing her options. In reality, she was calculating how much further she could push without revealing her true purpose. Mr. Hartley, she said finally, I think Senator Hawthorne is going to destroy himself and take a lot of innocent people down with him. If there's a way to minimize that damage while protecting myself, then yes, I'm interested. Hartley reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back before sliding it across the table. Call that number tomorrow evening at exactly 8 o'clock. Tell them that Tom recommended you. They'll give you further instructions. As Hartley stood to leave, Sarah couldn't resist one final probe. Mr. Hartley, just so I know what I'm getting into, how many people are we talking about? How big is this thing? Hartley paused, his hand on the back of his chair. Big enough that Senator Hawthorne's accusations could bring down a dozen careers and send half of them to prison. Big enough that the people involved will do absolutely anything to prevent that from happening. He leaned down close to her ear. And Sarah, when you call that number tomorrow, don't use your own phone. The phone number on Hartley's business card led to a voice that was professionally neutral and carefully modulated to reveal nothing about its owner. When Sarah called at exactly 8 o'clock the following evening, using a burner phone purchased with cash, she felt like she was stepping through a doorway into a world where the rules of law and democracy didn't apply. Tom recommended me, she said, using the phrase Hartley had given her. We know who you are, Ms. Chen. Are you calling from a secure location? Sarah was in the FBI's Arlington safe house, surrounded by recording equipment and agents monitoring every word. Yes. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, go to the Starbucks in DuPont Circle. Order a ground coffee with 2 sugars and sit at the table by the window facing Connecticut Avenue. Come alone. Someone will approach you with further instructions. The line went dead, leaving Sarah staring at the phone while Martinez and the FBI team processed what they'd heard. They're being careful, observed Agent Rebecca Torres, who specialized in organized crime surveillance. Public location, multiple escape routes, probably counter-surveillance to make sure you're not being followed. Which means they take the threat seriously, Martinez added. These aren't amateurs trying to cover up a simple bribery scheme. This is a sophisticated operation with professional security protocols. Richard had been silent throughout the call, but now he looked up from the legal documents he'd been reviewing. Sarah, you don't have to do this. We have enough evidence to move forward with prosecutions based on what you learned from Hartley. We have enough evidence to try, Sarah corrected, but Webb has already shown he can manipulate public opinion and legal proceedings. If we want to end this conspiracy permanently, we need to understand its full scope and identify all the players. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Park nodded reluctantly. The recording from your dinner with Hartley establishes conspiracy and confirms financial crimes, but it doesn't give us names, amounts, or specific evidence we can use in court. We need more. And tomorrow's meeting could provide that, Sarah said. Or it could be a trap designed to eliminate the last witness who can tie them to the evidence. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the risks. Sarah understood them better than anyone. She would be walking into a meeting with people who had already demonstrated their willingness to use violence to protect their interests. "I'll have backup," she said finally. "FBI surveillance teams, communication equipment, and a full tactical unit standing by." "Sarah," Richard said quietly, "these people firebombed my house and broke into a senator's office. They're not going to hesitate to kill an FBI agent if they think it's necessary. Then we make sure they don't get the chance." The next morning, DuPont Circle was bustling with the usual mix of tourists, students, and professionals that made it ideal for clandestine meetings. Sarah arrived early, positioning herself at the designated table with a clear view of the street, while FBI surveillance teams took positions throughout the area. At exactly 10 o'clock, a woman in her 40s approached Sarah's table. She was professionally dressed and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. "Ms. Chen, I'm Catherine Walsh. May I join you?" Sarah recognized the name from their investigation files. Catherine Walsh was a partner at one of Washington's most powerful lobbying firms, with clients including several major defense contractors. "Of course," Sarah said, gesturing to the empty chair. Walsh sat down and placed a leather portfolio on the table between them. "I understand you have concerns about your current employment situation." "That's one way to put it," Sarah replied, maintaining her cover as a secretary worried about her boss's mental breakdown. "We've reviewed your background, and we're impressed by your discretion and professionalism. We believe you could be valuable to our organization." "What kind of organization?" Walsh smiled with the practiced warmth of someone who made a living convincing people to do things against their better judgment. "Think of us as problem solvers, Ms. Chen. We help ensure that important government processes function smoothly, without the disruptions that can occur when unstable individuals make reckless accusations." "You mean like Senator Hawthorne?" "Exactly like Senator Hawthorne. His recent behavior has created unnecessary turbulence in several critical defense programs. We need someone close to him who can help us understand his intentions and, when possible, guide him toward more constructive approaches." Sarah leaned forward, projecting interest while her concealed recording equipment captured every word. "What would that involve, specifically?" "Information sharing, primarily. We need to know what evidence the senator believes he has, who he's been talking to, what his plans are for future disclosures. In exchange, you would receive substantial compensation and protection from any legal or professional consequences that might arise from the senator's actions." "How substantial?" Walsh opened her portfolio and withdrew a document. "This is a consulting agreement that would pay you $500,000 annually for your services, with a signing bonus of $250,000 upon execution." Sarah stared at the contract, genuinely surprised by the amount. "This is serious money." "We're serious people, Ms. Chen. The programs we're protecting are worth billions of dollars and are critical to national security. We can't allow them to be derailed by one man's psychological crisis." "And if I refuse?" Walsh's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "We hope that won't be necessary, but we should point out that your current situation is quite precarious. If Senator Hawthorne's breakdown continues to escalate, you could find yourself facing congressional investigation, legal liability, and professional destruction by association." The threat was delivered with corporate politeness, but it was unmistakably a threat nonetheless. "I need guarantees," Sarah said, playing her role. "Not just money, but protection. If I do this, I want assurance that nothing will happen to me if things go wrong." "What kind of protection?" "The kind that prevented anything from happening to you when Senator Hawthorne made his accusations. The kind that made his credibility disappear overnight." Walsh nodded approvingly. "You're thinking strategically." "Yes. We can provide that level of protection. Our associates include people in law enforcement, media, and government who understand the importance of maintaining stability." Sarah felt a chill as she realized the full scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just a defense contract fraud. It was a network of corruption that reached into multiple branches of government and law enforcement. Who else is involved? She asked. That information would be provided on a need-to-know basis as your involvement deepens. For now, it's sufficient to know that you would be working with people who have successfully managed similar situations for many years. Walsh pushed the contract across the table. We need an answer today, Ms. Chen. The situation with Senator Hawthorne is evolving rapidly, and we need to ensure we have the information necessary to manage it effectively. Sarah picked up the contract, pretending to read through its terms, while actually scanning the area for signs of danger. Something about Walsh's urgency felt wrong, like they were rushing her toward a decision because they didn't intend for her to live long enough to regret it. This is a big decision, Sarah said finally. I need time to think about it. I'm afraid time is a luxury we don't have. Senator Hawthorne has called a press conference for this afternoon. We need to know what he's planning to reveal before he reveals it. Sarah's pulse spiked. Richard hadn't mentioned any press conference to the FBI team. Either he was planning something without their knowledge, or Walsh was lying to pressure her into immediate compliance. What press conference? She asked. You don't know? Walsh's surprise seemed genuine. He's scheduled to address the media at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Our sources indicate he may have additional evidence he's planning to make public. I've been out of the office, Sarah said quickly. Senator Hawthorne gave me the week off after the stress of recent events. Walsh studied Sarah's face carefully. Ms. Chen, if you're not currently in Senator Hawthorne's confidence, then your value to us may be limited. I can regain his trust, Sarah said, feeling the situation slipping away from her. He still sees me as his loyal secretary. If I approach him with concern about his mental state and offer to help him manage the media attention, he'll confide in me. That would be quite valuable, Walsh agreed. In fact, it might be exactly what we need. She reached into her portfolio again and withdrew a small electronic device that looked like a thumb drive. If you can get close to Senator Hawthorne's computer system, this device will allow us to monitor his communications and access his files. Installing it would demonstrate your commitment to our arrangement and provide immediate value. Sarah stared at the device, recognizing it as sophisticated surveillance equipment that could give the conspiracy access to everything Richard was planning. Taking it would cross a line from information gathering to active sabotage. And if I install this, the signing bonus would be transferred to your account within 24 hours, and you would have our full protection from any consequences of Senator Hawthorne's actions. Sarah palmed the device while appearing to consider the offer. I'll do it. Walsh smiled with genuine satisfaction. Excellent. We'll expect confirmation that the device is installed by 6 o'clock this evening. After that, we'll provide you with communication protocols for ongoing information sharing. As Walsh gathered her materials and prepared to leave, Sarah realized she had learned everything she needed to know about the conspiracy's current operations. But she had also committed herself to a course of action that would either help bring down the network or get her killed in the attempt. Ms. Chen, Walsh said as she stood to leave, I should mention that we'll be monitoring your activities closely to ensure your safety and the security of our arrangement. Please don't do anything that might compromise either. After Walsh left, Sarah sat alone at the table for several minutes, processing what had just happened. The surveillance device in her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and the contract offer represented both an opportunity and a death sentence. She activated her concealed communication device and spoke quietly to her FBI backup team. Package delivered, returning to base for debrief. But as she stood to leave, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Across the street, partially hidden behind a newspaper, was one of the men who had attacked Richard's house 2 nights earlier. They weren't just monitoring her activities, they were prepared to eliminate her if she failed to follow through on her commitment. The FBI tactical team moved with precision, born of countless similar operations, but Sarah knew this one was different. As they approached the Meridian Defense Headquarters building in downtown D.C., she could feel the weight of 3 years of investigation culminating in what would either be a triumphant conclusion or a catastrophic failure. Remember, we need Walsh and her associates alive to testify against the others, Martinez reminded the team through their communications system. But if they resist or pose a threat to civilians, protect yourselves and the public. Sarah was wearing full tactical gear now, her cover blown, but her mission clear. The surveillance device Walsh had given her had been turned into a tracking beacon by FBI technical specialists, leading them directly to the conspiracy's command center. Sarah, you don't have to be here for this, Richard said, over the comm system from the FBI's mobile command center. "You've done enough." "I want to see it through," she replied. "These people tried to destroy your reputation and kill both of us. I want to watch them answer for it." The past 6 hours had been a whirlwind of revelations and arrests. After Sarah's meeting with Walsh, the FBI had moved quickly to implement a comprehensive takedown of the conspiracy. Using the intelligence Sarah had gathered, they had identified and arrested Thomas Hartley, who immediately agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Hartley's confession had been devastating in its scope. The Meridian Defense Conspiracy involved 12 senators, 8 Pentagon officials, 4 defense contractors, and a network of lobbyists and fixers who had been systematically stealing billions of dollars in taxpayer money over 5 years. Senator Marcus Webb had been arrested at his office 3 hours earlier, his carefully constructed facade crumbling when FBI agents presented him with financial records and recorded conversations that proved his guilt beyond any doubt. His final words before being taken into custody were a snarled accusation that Richard Hawthorne had destroyed everything good people had built. Now, as the FBI team prepared to raid the building where Walsh and her associates were coordinating their damage control efforts, Sarah reflected on how completely the situation had reversed. 48 hours earlier, Richard had been portrayed as a mentally unstable politician making wild accusations. Now he was being hailed as a hero who had exposed one of the largest corruption scandals in American political history. "All teams in position," came the voice of the tactical commander, "initiating breach in 3, 2, 1. The raid was swift and decisive. Walsh and 6 associates were arrested without resistance, their computer systems seized along with boxes of documents that would provide evidence for years of prosecutions. Sarah watched through her tactical visor as the woman who had tried to bribe her with $500,000 was led away in handcuffs, her corporate confidence replaced by the hollow-eyed shock of someone whose world had just collapsed. "Target secured," the tactical commander reported. "All subjects in custody, no casualties." Sarah felt a profound sense of relief mixed with exhaustion. The immediate danger was over, but she knew the legal proceedings and political ramifications would continue for years. 2 hours later, she found herself in Richard's temporary office at the FBI facility, both of them finally alone after days of constant supervision and crisis management. "So what happens now?" Richard asked, settling into a chair that had become familiar over their long collaboration. "Now you go back to being a senator, and I go back to being an FBI agent," Sarah replied. "Though I suspect both of our jobs are going to be more complicated than they were before. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." She looked at him, seeing the same directness that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. "Always. Over the past 3 years, how much of what happened between us was real?" The question Sarah had been dreading since her cover was blown. She had spent 3 years developing genuine feelings for a man she was supposed to be investigating, and now she had to figure out how to separate professional duty from personal truth. "The respect was real," she said quietly. "The friendship was real. The concern for your safety and your reputation, that was all real. The only thing that was false was why I was there in the first place." Richard nodded slowly. "And now that the investigation is over and the truth is out," Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city where they had both learned hard lessons about power, corruption, and the price of doing what was right. "Now I have to figure out how to have a relationship with someone who knows I spent 3 years lying to him, and you have to figure out whether you can trust someone whose job it was to spy on you." "Sarah," she turned back to face him, "I've spent my entire adult life in politics, surrounded by people who lie for a living. In 3 years of working together, you were the most honest person in my life, even when you were lying about who you were. How is that possible? Because you lied about your job, not about your character. Everything I respected about you, everything I valued about our working relationship, everything I came to care about, that was all real." Sarah felt tears she hadn't expected. "Richard, I'm not saying this is simple, or that we can just go back to the way things were, but I am saying that the person I got to know over 3 years is someone I'd like to keep knowing, whatever that looks like." Before Sarah could respond, Martinez knocked on the door and entered with a stack of documents. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you'd both want to know. The Attorney General is announcing the charges tomorrow. 12 counts of conspiracy, 47 counts of bribery, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and about 30 other charges I can't pronounce. Webb and his co-conspirators are looking at 20 to life. What about the people who attacked us? Sarah asked. Private security contractors hired through a shell company controlled by Meridian Defense. They're being charged with attempted murder, arson, and terrorism. The whole network is going down. After Martinez left, Richard and Sarah sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what they had accomplished and what it meant for their futures. Senator, Sarah said finally, I think you're going to need a new secretary. Richard smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since the crisis began. Actually, I was thinking I might need a new chief of staff, someone with investigative experience and a proven ability to uncover corruption. I don't know if the FBI would approve of that career change. They might if it was for national security purposes. After all, there's probably more corruption out there that needs to be investigated. Sarah considered the offer, imagining a future where she could use her skills to fight corruption openly, instead of through deception. It would be complicated, she said. Everything worthwhile is complicated. There would be questions about our relationship, about conflicts of interest, about whether the public could trust us to work together effectively. Sarah, we just brought down a multi-billion-dollar conspiracy that involved some of the most powerful people in Washington. I think we can handle a few questions about our working relationship. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Washington, D.C. They're painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Sarah of the autumn leaves in the Shenandoah Valley, where this phase of their story had begun. All right, Senator, she said finally, but I have one condition. What's that? No more secrets. If we're going to work together, we do it with complete honesty from both sides. Richard extended his hand across the desk. Deal. Though I should warn you, complete honesty from a politician might be more than you bargained for. Sarah shook his hand, feeling the start of something new and uncertain but genuine. I think I can handle it. After all, I've had 3 years of practice telling the difference between what you say and what you mean. And what do I mean now? Sarah smiled, finally allowing herself to hope that the future might hold something better than the deception and danger that had defined the past few days. You mean that we're going to make a pretty good team? The best, Richard agreed. And Sarah, thank you for saving my life. Thank you for being worth saving. As they gathered their files and prepared to leave the FBI facility, Sarah realized that the most important thing she had learned during her 3 years undercover wasn't about corruption or conspiracy. It was about the possibility of finding truth and trust even in the most unlikely circumstances. The secretary's secret was finally out, but the story of what came next was just beginning.